we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this. Thanks for coming. This is the Keep the Lights On 3 tools to help solar contractors grow webinar with Mayfield Renewables, SolarNexus, and Crest Creative. I'm just going to jump right into some housekeeping notes. All right, so please use the Q&A to ask any questions throughout the webinar. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you have. Please use the Q&A instead of the chat feature, as that's just easier to keep track of. You can use the chat for everything else or to access any links that are posted or anything like that. And this webinar will be available via follow-up email with both SolarNexus and Mayfield, as well as the following newsletters. Awesome, so we're just going to jump right in. So I'm joined here today with Michael Palmquist. He's the CEO of SolarNexus. Michael, if you want to give us your introduction.
Thanks, Shelly. Yeah, my name is Michael Palmquist. Happy to be here today. So I lead the SolarNexus team. We are a software application dedicated to the solar contracting industry. We've been in business for 12 years now, serving contractors across the United States and now actually all of North America. Happy to be here. I was actually a solar contractor at one point in my life, early in the industry, took some time off, worked in Silicon Valley to learn all about software, data, and in particular, business process engineering. And so that is something that we brought back to SolarNexus.
Great, thanks, Michael. I'm also joined here by Ryan Mayfield. He's the founder and CEO of Mayfield Renewables. Ryan, if you can give us your introduction.
Sure, thanks, Shelly. Happy to be here. And yeah, my name is Ryan Mayfield, and Mayfield Renewables is a technical consultancy, and we work with companies in the solar and the solar plus storage industries. And I started the company back in 2007, and we've been doing system design and engineering ever since. And so that's a core function of what our business is. And then we also work as consultants for companies within the industry, both manufacturers on product consulting and with contractors on project consulting. And then I've been doing education and training around the solar industry for a long time now. And similar to Michael, I got my start as a contractor, or working as a contractor, doing system design and engineering and installation way back when in the early 2000s.
Great, thanks, Ryan. All right, my name is Shelly Whitlock. I'm the managing director at Crest Creative. Crest Creative is an agency which creates visual assets for clean tech and renewable energy companies so that they can build brand identity and generate revenue. I am also a former solar PM. I've spent 5 years in the battery R&D industry, and I have a master's in renewable energy engineering, as well as a PMP certification. And I will be the moderator for this webinar this afternoon. Yeah, happy to be here, and let's get started. So talking with Michael and Ryan, we had thought of 3 primary tools that some of our solar contractors can use in order to scale their businesses. One is standardizing processes, really reducing the burden on customers and employees so that they always know what to expect. Getting partners with experience, so identifying what you do well and finding partners to complement your strengths. And then making time to be proactive. This is often one of the most difficult ones, and it's way easier said than done for most of our up and coming businesses. So thinking beyond the fires of today for prevention of those fires tomorrow. So I'm going to hop right into each of these things, and we all have tips for each of these. We're going to start off with some tips from SolarNexus on standardizing processes.
Okay, thanks, Shelly. Yeah, so my tip for standardizing the subject of standardizing processes is to think about aggregating marginal gains. You might ask yourself, what the heck is aggregating marginal gains? Well, let me give you an example. So, and this is going to be a separate industry, but it's very telling. So in 2003, Great Britain's professional cycling body hired a guy named Dave Brailsford as its new performance director. And at the time, professional cyclists in Great Britain had won just one gold medal in all the Olympics and had 0 wins in 110 years of the Tour de France. So what made Brailsford different from previous coaches was this relentless commitment to a strategy he referred to as the aggregation of marginal gains. So this is a philosophy searching for a tiny margin of improvement in everything that you do. And so the whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improve it by 1%, you'll get a significant increase when you put them all together. So they looked at all kinds of areas like designing a more comfortable seat. They did wind tunnel testing on clothing fabrics, but they also looked at unexpected things like what massage gel helped the riders recover faster and what pillows and mattresses led to the best night's sleep. And just 5 years after he took over, after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team dominated the cycling events at the next 2 Olympics Games, and British cyclists won 5 of the next 6 Tours de France. So none of these one little things made all the difference, but in aggregate, it made a huge difference. So how does this apply to the solar contracting business? Well, one example you might look at is data entry, right? Solar contracting is actually an information business, right? You're always entering in a customer's name and address in various different places. And if something gets entered incorrectly, it can be really costly, right? You rejected interconnection or incentive applications. So you might sit down and start by making a list of all the times that you input a customer's name and address, or look at all the ways and places that work status is communicated between workers on a project. And then once you have those, then you can look for ways to reduce the numbers of these instances. Nobody likes typing data, and of course, you can make mistakes, right? So you can apply software maybe that can help you to do that, or find other ways to improve these instances.
That's actually, as soon as you said that, Michael, it's one of the things that we did. This was years ago now, as far as design sets working at entering in data. And so one of the things that we noticed was something simple as on the title block of every page. So you get a standard design set, residential set might be 8 pages or something, but if you had to re-enter the address every single time, it's a little bit of a time suck, and it's just opened yourself up for error. And so one of the things that we did was found a way to use sheet set managers, which when we talked to other folks within the industry, a lot of people were like, we don't do that. That's like, it's just too advanced. It's for a relatively simple set. It's too much to do, or it's too advanced to set up. But in the end, it was just one of those like, well, but now we only have to enter this data once, shows up every time on every other page properly and correct. And then taking it a step further of getting clients to enter in that information that then gets exported in. And so we aren't worried about, was it East Main Street or was it West Main Street, and that kind of simple things like that.
Exactly, and they really add up over time because it's something that happens again and again and again and again, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. So something that we implemented without even realizing that we were aggregating marginal gains. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, let's hear from you, Ryan, on your tip.
So for us, standardizing the process, we work with a lot of contractors. We worked with a number of contractors over the years, and a couple things we actually have on here, prevent overselling and doing site surveys properly. And so what we see quite often is inconsistency in the site survey process, and it can be from multiple people within one company going out and doing site surveys. Maybe they do it slightly different. They'll do it their own way. They'll bring that data back. And it just makes it more difficult to make sure, is all the information there? Do we have all the right pieces of information to move forward in a system design? And so making sure that your consistency, I guess, is the key here, and not creating a site survey or a process that's so in-depth and so difficult that you're encouraging people to skip steps or to not do things because they don't see the value in it. So that's been an important one. And so we've spent a lot of time creating our own intake form that really helps guide our clients on here's the information that we really need. If we don't have this, we can't move forward. And that's another big thing for people to realize is if there's a checkbox on a form, or if there's a space for some piece of information on the form, it's there because we need it. It's not just because it's a nice to have. It's critical to making sure that we are going to be able to move forward in the process. And then right along with that, we see way too often we get a preliminary system design from a contractor where the roof is just chock full of modules, or they haven't identified equipment locations. And it becomes really difficult when this is what we're talking about, overselling, of seeing a roof design that has X number of kilowatts on it, and it's going to be very, very difficult to realistically get that on there. Either somebody didn't account for things like setbacks, or for pathways, or just good maintenance in general. And so, trying to keep, and this gets back to the site survey, making sure that you're not just selling it just for the sake of selling it. And then the big hard part is going back to a customer afterwards and trying to walk back, the system size. Typically is a difficult task and not a fun one for any salespeople to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we kind of see the same kinds of things. It's important for us at SolarNexus to provide tools that can help the contractor to prevent overselling by being able to use aerial imagery to draw accurate roofs that are sized properly. Being able to avoid things like skew, the imagery can be skewed. So understanding how to draw it such that you'll get accurate sizes, and then do the layouts based on those. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, our tip from Crest is really in investing in marketing and messaging early. So just like you want to have, standardized processes for your operations and for your designs and your site surveys, you really also want to invest in standardizing your processes for marketing and how you present yourself to your customers as early as you can. So this doesn't mean you need to spend a lot of time or a lot of money necessarily in your marketing early, but you do need to invest in what we call a small library of assets. So you want to have things like your logos and your templates and at least a small library of graphics worked out, and have your messaging dialed as early as possible in your company. So this is going to help you build that brand recognition and form that brand, which is really going to help you later down the road. So the bigger audience that you can build, the more impactful all of your sales, all of these assets that you're going to make, such as videos or webinars or other things like that, are going to be. You really want to just focus on building that audience. And the way that you can build that better audience that knows who you are is by building that brand recognition, which comes with consistency in how you present yourself every time. And this consistency is really going to help improve how quickly you can get things out as well. If you don't have consistent templates and logos and graphics that you can go to every time, it takes a heck of a lot longer when you're making LinkedIn or Facebook posts each time, and you need one person who can do it versus at a small company you can have anyone go and post these things as long as you have your library of assets and you have a system in place for how these things are posted.
Yeah, we've found that that's helpful, Shelly. I mean, we've been working with Crest, and it's definitely something. Not creating the wheel each time is an important aspect.
Right, and having that strong foundation really enables you so that then you can just think about it every 3-6 months, add a little bit into the library instead of trying to recreate that wheel every single time you try to post something. All right. Yeah, getting a partner with experience. Let's hear from you, Michael. What's your take on that?
Okay, great. So we think it's a good idea to work with partners that can help you avoid mistakes. I would say avoid rather than just even finding mistakes, but to help you be better out the gate. And really what we're talking about here is the difference between horizontal or generic non-industry specific software solutions. I'm speaking of things like Salesforce or Monday.com or spreadsheets, versus a vertical industry specific software like we provide. And the ways that it really helps you is, well, there's lots of capable CRM and project management software on the market, but these generic softwares require you to build in your specific industry and company knowledge into the software, right? It's not pre-built with that in it. So effective and efficient process design is already really challenging. Process automation is tightly dependent on the data that you have available. So that doesn't, again, that software doesn't come necessarily with the notion of modules and inverters and all of the different things that are important to operating your solar contracting business. So ask yourself, do you or someone on your team have this kind of expertise? Again, many of these generic software companies have consultants that you can hire, but these consultants may not be well acquainted with your business and the data necessary to effectively run your business. So you can get somebody that knows that software really well, but doesn't know your business processes and the data that's important. So you end up creating the same data again in these systems, and then may not talk with your other systems, and you lack that consistency. So in the bottom line is that having that direct experience in your business reduces the time needed to set up any of your systems, and you don't have to explain your requirements to another party who may not be able to even identify when something is possibly missed.
Yeah, and I would, as far as I would say on our tips along that, it goes right along those lines of being able to identify, if things are missed, or I guess finding those partners. For us, we've been doing the system designs, long enough where we've had people present to us. They'll come to us with potential sales layouts or things like that, and for us, having been in the industry for a long enough time, the experience that we've been able to gain of looking at some preliminary layouts and looking at things and being able to understand, well, that's just probably not a good idea, or at least being able to look at it a little bit differently. And early on in that process, being able to identify that and make a pivot and be able to understand what some of the potential changes could be is an important thing. So we've seen, one of the things that we've seen is, back to your point previously, Michael, on using imagery that is up to date or good imagery. We've seen people come to us with system layouts, system designs that go right over existing rooftop units, air handler units, things like that, and it's either because they just flat out missed it, they didn't recognize what it was, or things like that. And so this all comes down to, I think, for us, being able to take that time, look at the roof, look at the ground, whatever it is that where we're putting the modules, and understanding what the challenges will be, and then be able to relay those back. And so, we have on here, just because it's physically possible doesn't mean you should do it. Another thing that comes up is, even if you do a layout and you can fit all those modules on there, the thing that we've seen time and time again is when it comes time to do the installation, there's something going on that you can't tell. There's a change in slope on the roof, and that's on larger commercial scale systems. We see that all the time on a low slope roof. There's a change in slope in the roof. There's a valley, or there's a peak in the roof that you just can't tell, and you can't put a module there. And so you have to move something around. And so if you haven't given yourself that space, if you haven't given those are all just things to consider as you're going.
It reminds me of another point along the lines of just because it's physically possible. So we also see a lot of folks who kind of get hung up a little bit with maybe what's the newest product that's out there, and maybe a customer asks about it, and then they start saying, oh yeah, we'll install this or we'll install that, without actually learning about what it takes to do the installation first. It's like, yeah, I could do that, but does that mean that you should actually do that? You should probably see, do we have the expertise? Does this mean, that we have to have other parts on the truck at the same time, and those kinds of things. So we typically advise our clients to look pretty carefully at their service offerings and what they're telling their customers they can do.
Yeah, and actually I have a very specific job where I remember exactly that happening, Michael. I'll keep names anonymous here, but there were brand new pieces of electronics coming out and things getting paired up together. And it was exactly that. It was, yes, they should and could and probably do work together, but it was a little bit this contractor getting out over their skis, and it turned into just quite a nightmare of a project. Just there were so many communication issues, so much, and it turned out to be even things where just the mere location of the inverters caused problems. It was in relation to elevators, and so it was just a cascading event, series of events that caused problems, and it was all, I think, around this. Yeah, the customer sold themselves on this piece of equipment and really wasn't necessary. And so, if the contractor had just taken a moment to say no, I think we could have saved a lot of problems.
Yeah, that's an important aspect, being a contractor, knowing when to say no.
Yes.
Pick your battles. Yeah.
Yes.
Oop, too far. All right. Yeah, and that's another thing. Yeah, so coming in with our tip from Crest, it's really working with partners that know your customers, and that's something that SolarNexus and Mayfield both know very well as well. So especially when it comes to marketing, really you want to make sure your partners, that are helping you with that really know who your customers are. So this is very evident when you look at, any kind of high-tech companies, especially battery companies, when marketing and engineering are disconnected, things aren't communicated very clearly. So I'm sure we've all read articles at a time or another where we just wanted to tear our hair out. For me, it's when I've read things like, we have high quality, safe cells. To me, when I see that, that means nothing to me. I've worked in a battery lab for a long time, and I've seen every battery chemistry blow up under the right circumstances. So it's not to say that no battery chemistry is safe, but the idea of a safe cell is somewhat generic. What's safe about it? Does it have an excellent BMS? Is it the particular chemistry under these conditions? Is it the thermal regulation that you have? And quality is another one of these things, it's one of the most subjective terms that can be used, unless you're using it in a manufacturing setting, which often we aren't. For example, like this mug. This is a great mug. I got it for free, and I would say it's high quality. It keeps my drink warm for 30 minutes. It's great. I love it. I use it all the time. If I paid $40 for this mug, I would have a very different opinion. I would say this is not a high quality mug for $40. It only keeps my drink warm for 30 minutes. That's not high quality. I could get a hydro flask for the same price that keeps my drink warm for 6 hours. So you don't really determine quality. Your customers determine quality based on a number of factors. So the price, the experience, the customer service. So going with partners who don't understand your product and your brand are far more likely to use these generic terms like this is quality, but you don't determine that, your customer does. So although you don't really want an engineer describing the value either, you don't want an engineer talking about, all the things this is made of and why they're so great either. You don't also want to be lost in fluff when it comes to marketing your products. So consider getting a partner that knows your customers, especially in solar contracting businesses. A lot of times we see all these companies blend together. If you picture a solar company logo in your head right now, I'm sure you'll picture something with blue, green, and yellow with a sun and a solar panel, and that would be 90% of all logos. So although this is a literal interpretation of what we do, there's much more than that. So, when comparing a bunch of companies that look identical, you need to figure out what your differentiator is, and you're not going to find that with a company that doesn't understand who your customer is. All right. So that brings us to making time to be proactive, which is arguably one of the most important things when trying to scale, thinking about tomorrow. So, Michael, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Shelly. Okay, so my tip has to do with spending some time on project retrospectives and also using root cause analysis. And the underlying issue here is really you're spending some time now to save or avoid mistakes later. And so a project retrospective is essentially a meeting where you in an organized way, get feedback from everyone who was involved in the project. And many contractors never take the time to get detailed feedback about individual projects in any organized way. So oftentimes the feedback comes only if a customer is dissatisfied. And while customer feedback is valuable, it doesn't tell you the whole story, right? So a key aspect of doing retrospectives is that they solicit feedback from everyone involved on the project, including the employees in the field, such as the site technicians and the install teams. The point is, you can't be passive about getting feedback from the field. Oftentimes, field personnel, if there's an issue, they'll simply fix things in the field if they can. And if it can be fixed in the field, you may never hear about it. So the assumption is that everything then went well, right? But there's lots of examples where maybe that's not really true. And there are some things that you can do in your business. You can learn from your field crews and do things in your business to improve everybody's lives. Maybe the customer had aesthetic concerns requiring lots of discussion with the crew on site. And these issues maybe could have been caught during the design stage. Maybe there was an unanticipated trip to the electrical distributor. And this was needed because the parts that were required weren't on the truck. And so then taking this a little further, why weren't they on the truck? This might reveal the root cause analysis is because maybe you have too diverse a set of service offerings requiring too many different kinds of parts to be on the truck. And so again, going back to that notion of maybe it's important to simplify your service offerings. So we recommend doing at least a bi-weekly or a couple times a month retrospective meeting, emphasizing that the purpose is to improve operations, not to blame or punish anyone. This should be a paid thing. And check out our blog has a really great article that goes into much more detail about retrospectives and root cause analysis.
It's interesting, Michael, and one of the things that we've seen is similar to that in working with contractors, getting their feedback on the designs. How did it go in the field? How did and we get a lot of the best information from those folks that are out in the field doing it. And one of the things, I remember one of the big things that we got back from a specific contractor was making the plan sets too specific and calling out very specific. So here's a junction box that you're going to bring your conductors in, you're going to change it, you're going to convert to a junction box. Here's even the size of the junction box. We thought we were helping the contractor out by saying here's the size, so they knew what to go get from the supply house. But maybe the supply house was out of that size and they needed to go a little bit bigger, or they needed to make a change on the fly. And sometimes having too specific of information was detrimental, because then if you have to put a 4x4 box in and you can't get that, now you're waiting a day because that's when the shipment's coming in, things like that, where could have gone to a 6x6 or something like that. And so that's just been an interesting piece of feedback that we've gotten when we taking the time to check in with the field crew and understand what the what it is that they've seen, or how this whole process can be made better.
Yeah, that's a good example right there, because you do have to have the right amount of flexibility in your processes, in your documentation, because everybody's got a job to do, and you don't want to ever put anything in the way of getting the job done. But at the same time, you want to be able to take a look at the issues, understand them, and find ways to avoid as many of the issues as possible.
Right.
Yeah, good example.
Yeah, and so for us, I think a big part of it is taking time, spending time on education and training. Admittedly, we do a fair amount of education and training, and that's something that I've been involved in for many, many years. And the idea here, though, is there's multiple ways of getting education and training, and waiting until your installers, till your contractors are on the roof or on the job site learning about a specific piece of equipment. It's not the right time to be learning exactly how to install something, especially if it's a newer technology or if you have to do something different than what you've done the last 24 installations. So taking that time, getting trained up on the specifics of the equipment is a very important thing. And of course, we're in such a dynamic industry; things are changing all the time, and so staying on top of it is daunting. But nonetheless, it's an important fact, because if you go and install something, going back and undoing and then redoing work is going to be much more costly than just going through and learning about how to do things properly the first time. So that's a big one. And in that same vein, a thing that we see a lot are codes and standards. And so knowing what specific codes are applicable, how to install your systems per whatever codes are applicable for your location. And then, of course, as we all know, National Electrical Code, for example, changes or it gets updated, I should say, every 3 years. And so it's a continuous process of knowing, here's the code cycle that we're under, here is what it requires to do a job, properly. And part of it too is, one of the things that's always interesting, and we get this question a lot, is for folks that are installing, I'll use California as an example because they're consistently 3 years behind on the NEC. The NEC that the California follows is a full cycle behind what's current. And so right now, they are on the 2017 code. They're about to change to 2020 here coming up at the beginning of the year. But looking forward and seeing a change and being able to potentially apply that change. And so being able to understand what's coming up and how it may impact your installation. And sometimes it's because of the equipment itself. And so applying a code change. But the word of warning I always give to people is, if you're looking forward, if you're in California right now and you want to do something per 2020 code, 2020 code, you need to talk to your AHJ. You need to be able to explain to them what's going on, why you're trying to make that. And very often it's for good reason. And this comes into, knowing what's coming up, what the changes are, being educated on specifics within the industry.
Yeah, that's all good points. I think we also see sometimes we have clients who sort of have their sweet spot as far as types of projects that they deal with. Maybe they've been just doing, roof mounted PV, but then, of course, now we've got lots of customers asking for batteries, or they might get opportunistically, hey, there's a ground mount coming, but they've not done these before, or a larger commercial job, and you don't want to wait until like, oh well, let's see if we can get the sale and then look for help afterwards, or go out and try it and then figure out the things that we don't know. So that's definitely another really big case of being proactive. You know, you if know what you don't know, and reach out for help early rather than later.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I feel like those two really go in hand. I mean, do your retrospectives and figure out where you need education and training. And
Yep.
that's really what needs to happen. All right. And for Crest Point, I mean, really what we think is, you know, really spending time on marketing as early as you can, really before you need it. What we say is once you need marketing, it's really too late. So strong brands will help you in a number of ways, not just in sales, but also we've seen it help greatly in recruiting and hiring as well. So on a fundamental level, to scale, you want to clean up operations, you want to build capacity, and you want to increase sales. But the link between marketing and sales, yeah, although that's something we all know, you know, there are many other benefits, but none of these are going to be seen from, singular Facebook or LinkedIn ads. Really, you want to work towards establishing a brand. If you need sales today, you need that salesperson, but really to grow sales, to get that inbound, you need marketing. That's not going to be sales, that's going to be marketing that's going to help you with that inbound. That's going to greatly help your sales team, your HR, and marketing also helps in ways such as getting your salespeople assets to help them make sales better, things like educational materials, and that helps in your product differentiation as well. You know, like I said before, if you're advertising yourself with the same 3 generic phrases as everyone else, you're not differentiating your product. But if you're providing things like educational materials, you're telling customers things that they don't know already, you know, that's another way to draw customers in and help with that sales, and then also eventually help with that recruiting and hiring, because just like, you know, Tesla has no problem, you know, recruiting and hiring. These big brands have no problem recruiting and hiring, and that's because they have this brand recognition. It's the same thing for even large brands, large companies in the renewable industry. People want to work for brands that are exciting and that are inspirational. And any of these companies can be that way too, if you spend a little bit of time marketing in order to get there. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A portion of our session here. Let me just pull up that chat one sec. All right, so it looks like I have a few questions. So the first one, looks like it's directed at Mayfield. So Ryan, what are some credentials people should look for when considering third-party outsourcing?
Third-party outsourcing, you know, the gold standard in our industry is NABCEP, and so, you know, looking and seeing what credentials. NABCEP has a number of certifications that people can get. The installer certification is definitely the top of that heap. So that's definitely one that, you know, internal within our company, a lot of people have gotten previously when they were doing installations. It's very much geared towards active installations in the field, but there's also design and installation type of NABCEP certification. So that's the one that comes to mind first and foremost. And another one that, you know, people look at and are always asking us, and it's a valid question, is, you know, professional engineers, what you have ability to do professional engineering. And not to say that it's an absolute requirement to have professional engineers on staff, but if the third-party designers have good relationships with professional engineers, that's always an important thing at a minimum, I would say. Being able to, not every project requires professional engineering, but it's not something you want to, like to Michael's point of, you know, you don't want to make the sale and then figure it out later. So making sure that that resource is already available. So those are the two big ones that come to mind for me when we talk about you know, potential types of credentials for designers.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Oh, so this next one is a good one. So most of what we've talked about, yeah, has been around, being proactive, but you want to know, what tips do we have for a company that might already feel behind? Michael, do you want to start on this one?
Sure, I'll go ahead. So it's, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can possibly feel behind because there's a lot of different aspects of your business. Depending on the particular aspect where you're feeling behind, I think that the answers may change a little bit. But finding a trusted partner with that experience is very helpful. Experience is, it's what's that old saying? You can't buy experience, but you can kind of, right? You can get someone who has the experience that can help you to avoid the issues. And I would say that that's probably the best advice that you can give, is just to, and the folks are available. You have questions about your business, come talk to us. We don't have necessarily all the answers, but we've been in the business a long time and can point you to other trusted experts. And so finding somebody with experience, I guess, is what I would say.
I think I'd echo that, and just don't feel like you have to do everything on your own. There are resources out there, and there's ways to get help. And one of the really hard things to do is a lot of times is differentiating what you can or should do versus maybe getting some help from an outside source. And so a lot of times it can be difficult to step back far enough and be able to do that. I know that I'm someone speaking personal experience here, and so being able to recognize when that help is needed, and understand that, yeah, like Michael, you can buy it. It's going to come somewhat at a cost, but everything's going to cost, depending on where your attention is drawn and what you're being pulled into. So doing that, and then as much as you can, and I know it's hard to do in the moment, but having that retrospective, kind of going back to that same point Michael was making before, what got us to this point, why are we here, and what can we change in the future so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like, your quote earlier, Ryan, of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that's something we use all the time in consulting with our clients at Crest Consulting Services, which is that one of the first things we try to do is get capacity for our CEOs. So there are certain decisions that can only be made by certain people. And, just because you can be doing design, as a CEO, or you can be doing, managing operations, doesn't mean you should be. So finding out what you can do, how you can pass these things on to other people in your company so you can have time to be proactive. Without making that time to be proactive, you're never going to be able to scale. So figuring out what tasks you can give to other people, whether that's getting a software to help you do it, passing it on to an employee to help you do it, or finding a partner to help you do it. You have to make time so that you can be proactive. And there's a number of ways to do that, but yeah, exactly. All right, so our next one here, I can definitely relate to this. Hiring and training is slow, but signing up for new services and integrating that service into your business is also slow. So how do we make integration fast and easy at businesses like SolarNexus or Mayfield? Like, are those fast and easy to do? I mean, all of these things seem to be slow.
That's a really good question. They definitely can be. So notion of SolarNexus is try to limit the integrations that you have to make. We provide most of the tools and the data within the application to do the main process, the sales and project management. and generating, documentation, managing revisions, a lot of the processes, so that you don't have to do integrations. You don't have to try to piece together different applications. One thing that people don't acknowledge, I mean, obviously it takes time, and one of the biggest reasons that things take time is that all the different applications, software applications, have different data models for different things, and getting those to match, like, okay, well, what is a software module? What is a system? What is a PV system? What does that look like? What is a site? What is, what's included? How do you define all of those things? Actually becomes very, very difficult. I mean, even a customer. What is a customer? Does a customer have, is it just a name and a phone number and an address? Well, actually, it can be very complicated. There can be multiple parties. What type of, so all of those things contribute to the difficulty of integrating software applications. So my number one recommendation is at least consider ways to reduce the number of integrations that are required, because they are difficult, time-consuming, and can be expensive. And then you've got your eggs in multiple baskets, which can be a good thing, but it's also a lot harder to manage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And for us, I think it's interesting because, I'm thinking of a brand new client coming on, and they have the job sold. They have, they're asking, maybe they come to us for some design services, and but there's all the information there, to Michael's point, there's information in different locations, and gathering all that information, getting it all to a single point, it does take some time. And so, I mean, I think all of these, for us, maybe our time scale might be a little bit different than, like you were saying, Michael. It depends on what that problem is, or what the issue is, the timeline, and how easily it can get integrated. But even for us, the idea that we can, get on the phone with somebody and just start doing a design in the next hour or something like that it's not quite that easy. But I think for us, and this goes back to, finding trusted partners, finding people you can work with. We've been doing it for a long time, so we have a process, we have a way of gathering information, or getting information to help relieve that timeline. Because that's the other thing, is we're all moving in this world where, we get a call and got a project, and, well, what's your timeline? And it's like, well, when can you have it? Could you have it done last week? Because that's when we should have been going to permit, kind of thing. And so I think just setting realistic expectations is also a big part of it.
Yeah, and I've been a part of the setup of several different project management tools, and I can definitely relate to what you're saying there, Michael, as well. And that no matter what you're doing, these things are going to take time, and none of these things are going to be set up overnight. So, this person's right in that, yeah, hiring and training is slow, and getting partners can sometimes, and integrating any kind of project management software or onboarding of a new partner, anything is going to take time. But just because they both take time, it doesn't mean it's not going to be worth it in the end. So, I mean, with your new project management tool, any of them are going to take time. And if you're buying into a project management tool that says it's not going to take any time to set up, I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't believe that. They're all going to take time to set up, but it's going to save you time later. That's the whole goal. So it's not going to take time later. You can set it all up yourself and spend your own time to do it, but you'll continue spending time, down the road. So, with SolarNexus, you might buy once, and then you'll spend all your time up front and then save the time later. Yeah. All right, great. Well, I think that's all we got. Any last comments, Michael and Ryan, before you wrap up, any last recommendations for the audience on scaling and words of wisdom from your own businesses?
Well, I think just the notion of standardization, and I go back to the aggregating marginal gains. Anytime you can make a little improvement, don't scoff at its value, because if you're going to continue and do project after project, those savings, that efficiency will really add up over time. And that's really critical. And the other thing is, when you say standardized process, that means getting everybody on board. You may not end up doing the best process initially, but by standardizing it and measuring it, you will be able to tell that, hey, here's something that maybe we can improve. And without that, you can't improve it if you can't measure it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I was going to say to that exact point, Michael, just don't worry about getting everything right off the bat. I mean, as you make changes, as you make improvements, you're going to see things that do and don't work, and just going to have to be able to be nimble and make those tweaks all along. So don't worry if you didn't get all of those things to make those improvements on, if they didn't get identified right away. Don't worry about it. It'll all come.
Absolutely. And I guess I would just leave with, starting as early as possible on things like marketing. And, you don't have to, blow the bank on the first go, just getting some standard templates and things like that to start building your audience is going to go a long way. And building your library of resources every 3 to 6 months, something that's really going to help grow your audience, and it really helps build brand recognition and helps with things like sales, hiring, and recruiting. Is going to be great in the long run to helping you scale. All right, and on that note, if you want to check out SolarNexus, you can find them at solarnexus.com. Mayfield Renewables at mayfield.energy, and Crest at crestcreativeagency.com. Thanks, Michael and Ryan. And
thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
Enjoy
everyone.
the discussion.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.